Well, James, thank you for joining me today on Let's Talk. Today we are going to be talking the Friday the 13th franchise and your film, Jason Ryzen. Could you please give a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Um, yeah, I'm James Sweet, director of Jason Rising. I started off as a horror nut as a kid and kind of got into haunted houses, special effects, that kind of stuff when I was younger, and then um, sort of got the acting bug and started acting probably around 96 and did a lot of little short films, student films, and then I was finally able to land a co-starring role on The Librarians and Z Nation, and from that point on, I always wanted to make my own film, and so I started learning filmmaking through the experiences that I had on set as an actor. And I made my first short film. It was about 10 minutes. It was an original concept called Blood and Sugar. It had Robert Blanche as the director, and he wrote that with me. And after that was completed, it was, what do I do now? And I thought maybe a fan film would be kind of cool because you could generate an audience. Because we really, even though, um, Blood and Sugar was a fun film, it was a fun learning experience as a filmmaker and as a writer. But you really don't gain much of an audience when you're kind of a new filmmaker and nobody really knows who you are or cares. Um, but I thought maybe a fan film would be good because it could, maybe already have a fan base. So I was looking into what would I do as a filmmaker for a fan film, and Friday the 13th was always something that felt right because I was such a geek on it growing up.
Who isn't?
Um, right? And I felt like that was, there was so many Star Wars fan films out there already. It just felt like I didn't want to just be a face in the crowd. So I thought what I felt the most comfortable with was doing something I was most familiar with was Friday the 13th.
And it being with the way it is at the minute, with the lawsuit going on and fans just itching for their next Jason fix, it really is the most logical to go with as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say that I did it because of the lawsuit or because we haven't, because during that time, I mean, the last one was 2009, and then I think I started developing it around 2017. So it had been a few years, but I don't think that would have stopped me whether they had films out or not. I still would have done it either way, because I want the content just like anybody else.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think that I would have not made the film, even if there were more films coming out.
And that will bring us to why I have yourself on here today. We are going to talk Jason Rising and maybe give out some spoilers. So people who haven't seen it,
Spoiler
um,
alert.
yeah, spoiler alert, there will be spoilers. But we're going to do the ultimate and we're going to cover Friday the 13th, the whole franchise leading up to your epic release. So without further ado, we're going to start off with Friday the 13th, the very first entry in the franchise, which, funnily enough, doesn't really feature Jason in a prominent serial killer role. So, what were your thoughts upon first viewing the first Friday the 13th?
Um, I saw, I was pretty young when a lot of these came out, and I didn't actually get into a lot of the Friday the 13th films until I was probably about 12 years old. I mean, I had heard of them and knew of them. And the first one I think I watched was, I would say part 4, but I can't say for sure. Part 4 was definitely one of my favorites, but I don't remember whether I watched them in a consecutive order or not. I just don't remember.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing part 1, and the one thing that part 1 has is, I guess it's that campfire ghost story lore that I think really um, really resonates. Not enough. I don't. It doesn't resonate enough through the franchise, but it's what definitely started the franchise and made, I think, Jason scarier than he would have been normally if they'd have left it out
Yeah.
and tried to do it like an. Obviously, it was sort of an afterthought, bringing Jason, out as a boy back from the dead out of the lake at the end. But if they'd have tried to do that in the second movie without that piece, that little 11 seconds of scare at the end, I don't know if it would have had the same effect.
I have to agree with you there. That end segment really did start up. It started up a whole franchise that I'm pretty sure no one involved with the film at the time thought would kick off. They never thought this small movie they're doing about this woman getting revenge on these counselors who she sees as wrongdoers becoming such a huge hit. And out of like the whole franchise in general, there are stars either that have had their time in the light or coming up. Like the first one featured Kevin Bacon, and he has one of the most memorable deaths in the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the on-screen killing of the snake, if you remember that,
Mm-hmm.
which for an animal getting killed on screen, they didn't really kick up too much fuss over that, did they?
No, and that's funny that you say that, because I always, after knowing that they actually really, you know, beheaded this snake on set, you're like, you couldn't do that today
No,
and get
you would
away
not
with
get
it.
away with
You'd be
that.
fined like crazy. But it's funny that, like you said, it really hasn't. I've never really heard much of a commotion over that bit. Maybe it's just because it's a snake. I don't know. If it was furry and cute, it'd be different. Maybe, I don't know.
And then you had the makeup artist Tom Savini, or special effects, should I say? Who I have to say, Tom Savini is probably one of my favorite dudes, just to follow and just to see what he can create. Because he, even back in the day, he always seemed to be one step ahead, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think, I was a huge Tom Savini fan as well as a kid, and um, having his effects knowledge, as well as kind of the magician tricks that he was able to use on screen to sell those kills and sell those effects, that's huge. I mean, that's what really helped, I think, make that movie terrifying back in, the 80s, was knowing that you could pull off a death like that and make it look believable.
And then before we sort of finish up on, because we've got 11 movies to cover, I think it is 12, 12. God, I'm so 13, including yours. I am terrible this evening.
Well, I mean, if there'd be a lot more if we included all the fan films,
We'd be there a while, wouldn't we?
but it'd almost be about that same number on its own. Because I mean, look, we have Never Hike Alone, we have Never Hike in the Snow, we have Jason Rising,
Vengeance.
Vengeance. You have uh, His Name Was Jason, and the list goes on. Even the Michael versus Jason one is pretty decent production on that one as well, and Yeah, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. I think it's, you know, you're kind of in this on Voorhees, um, but I think we're in this, you know, wake of Never Hike Alone, where people are getting uh, inspired as filmmakers as well as Friday the 13th fans to be able to create content that they wouldn't normally get from a studio, and putting out these individual stories that are each unique, each are kind of telling their own tale, taking the stuff that they love from the franchise and incorporating it into their own output, you know, into their own view. And it's kind of neat because there's so much, like, I always say, you take the Mandalorian for example in Star Wars. There's room for movies, and there's room for other media content like series and shows, and you can, if you get the right team of people, you can do this and still have all this different avenues to be able to tell, you know, the story of Camp Crystal Lake and the Voorhees.
Yeah, there's so much you can do with even the smallest of characters, the smallest of plot lines, even like for yourself as well. Spoiler alert: you've brought back Adrian King, and then as Alice, and then you've got the character of Jenny from Part Two appearing in your Jason Ryzen, and then as you're saying, Womp Stomp have done their Never Hike, which focuses on the Tommy Jarvis character and follows up on where he left off in Part Six to where he is now. And then there's one coming out called Roseblood, which it follows Tina, Dr. Cruz, and I think it's Nick from Part 7.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool to see fans get together and bring back the actual stars from these movies and continue their story.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's amazing. But not only that, it's great to see that these actors that played these characters are joining forces with us fan filmmakers and you know, coming on board to help tell this story and you know, create new content and show that there is room for these characters to survive and give longevity to throughout more. Um, you know, if you took out the first 5 minutes of part two, you know, that would have eliminated a lot of controversy with Alice,
Yeah.
and it really wouldn't have changed the way part two was from the rest of the movie on, because you could have taken that bit out and it wouldn't have made a bit of difference for the rest of the film.
So before we move on to part two, just as you mentioned it there, so ranking the movies as we go along. Part one, yay or nay?
Oh, part one's definitely a yay.
I agree with you there. And then moving on to part two, which you said about the beginning, killing off of the Alice character at the beginning. Bold move or stupid move?
My opinion, I think stupid move. I think it was unnecessary. I It felt like they just were trying to dispose of a character,
Yeah,
and I to me it's thinking that, you know, if you're a studio and you want to be smart business wise, why kill off somebody that may you have you're leaving out options. You're taking options away of a character that could come back later on or something by just eliminating it instantly like that. I see, you know, kind of why they did it to connect from the first one a little bit, but you know, Jason's using a telephone. He knows how to find addresses now, and it, it just seemed kind of silly. It felt very Halloween. It had sort of a Michael Myers, you know, vibe to
yeah.
that beginning. So, and you know, the rest of the film, I love. I love the rest of the film.
Yeah, it's actually a fun entry. Often with the franchise, the first four would be the ones I revisit the most.
hmm
Because they have fun stories, fun kills, but they feature some really good characters.
Yeah,
Um, a character's death or not death in part two that always got me was, Paul. He had a fight with Jason and just disappeared. Did he die? Didn't he die? It's like left in limbo.
yeah.
What's your take on it?
I think he probably lived. He probably just, you know, got through it. They don't really show it. Um, Maybe it was another one of those things where Paul could have been involved in the third one. Um, Before they decide. I mean, I know that they were looking at doing having Amy steal in the third one as well, but because they had a completely different script for it. I know Amy's talked about that, so maybe Paul was involved in that somewhat. But it's interesting when there's a lot of choices and changes that go on during a film production that may not have been thought out thoroughly during the time when they were created, and you look at it now and you go, oh, this whole theory was, there's a plot behind all of this, and what's the significance of this the way it is now. During the production, it probably wasn't even thought about. It was just something where, hey, we don't have the budget to finish, you know, showing this, or we don't feel it's necessary. It doesn't do anything for the story. So it could just be one of those things where they figured that Jason coming through the window at the end of part two was enough to do their little jump scare at the end, similar to part one, and then, take uh, Ginny away in the ambulance, and, you know, showing Paul was maybe just an unnecessary thing, or left to you decide kind of bit.
And then just you'd mentioned there about a change to the part three script that featured Jenny. Would she have been a prominent character, or would it have been the same case as part two? She would have been off in the first 10 minutes or so.
No, supposedly she was, my understanding, she was, I think, like off to college or something, because she was, her character talks about being a child psychologist, which is part of the reason why I kind of made her uh, the therapist in our film at the end. Uh, but her and I can't remember what the other character is that she goes off and has to hunt down Jason. I think Paul was actually in it. I'm not sure if he was killed off or what. It's been a long time since I've heard her talking about it, but um, I think it became a money thing, and then they scrapped the whole idea and went with part three, 3D that we know today.
And before we move on to that one, part two, yay or nay?
Definitely a yay.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorites. And then part three um, is iconic because that's where we first get Jason and his hockey mask. So how did that moment feel when you first saw Jason in that hockey mask? I remember seeing it when I was a kid and it terrified me.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely terrifying. I remember seeing I was pretty young when I'm gonna shut my door really quick. I got a
Yeah, no worries.
chihuahua.
Man.
If you're a delivery driver, you're gonna get barked at. But no, I remember seeing those commercials. I was probably about 10 years old, maybe 9 or 10. And I remember seeing that commercial when Jason's coming through the window with the hockey mask on, and I didn't understand it. I didn't know exactly what it was about. But yeah, no, it was pretty creepy because I went to outdoor school when you're in middle school in the 6th grade, at least back when I was then, they used to take you to outdoor school for a week. Your class would go and you'd go with this summer camp and stay for a week. And I remember all the kids talking about Jason, and they were all scared at night. You know, a lot of them couldn't sleep because they're all scared about Jason. I'm like, I don't know who's this Jason guy, because I didn't really find out about it until about, when I was in 7th grade, and that's when it intrigued me, and I really got into it at that point. But yeah, no, that was, and it's that, I think it has to do with the idea that you don't know what's underneath that mask, and it's that blank, expressionless, thing that is unfamiliar, and when we don't understand something, that's what scares us.
Yeah, and that's basically what they were going for with that. Like, the only time you saw Jason's face was, when was it? After he was initially hung, wasn't it, in the barn?
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to see what was underneath. And props to the makeup team, because that still stands to this day. It's still pretty terrifying to this day. Like, I know if I showed it to my kids, they wouldn't be sleeping at night anyway.
Yeah, that was Stan Winston, who did Predator and Terminator, and yeah, I mean, you have to give props to that, because I was a fan of all kinds of effects people like Savini and Stan Winston and Greg Nicotero and Dick Smith and all these greats. That's pretty cool that he's associated with Friday the 13th as well.
And then the third entry also had, I think it had one of the best characters ever in it, of Shelley. He was such a likable character, and I think everyone can sort of relate to Shelley a little bit. Don't you agree?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Shelley was awkward, and but it worked. It was you felt for him when he couldn't get the date.
Yeah.
And you kind of understood why he was always doing his little pranks, but I think that whole little idea worked really well to get Jason the mask.
Yeah,
It
it did
it felt
indeed.
natural.
Yeah, because who other than the guy that is running around trying to scare everyone, in all his different costumes and playing dead. He was the ultimate person to give Jason the iconic look, and I think Larry Zerner even loves the fact that he can be like, I gave Jason that look.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I think I think some of the other characters in the film, like I'm trying to remember the names. I can't think of them off the top of my head. The the two hippies. Um,
Um,
but I love those two
Andy
characters
and
as
Trish,
well.
was it? Andy?
Um, Trying to remember.
No, Andy was he was the young
Oh no,
fella.
Andy had the
Yeah.
yo-yo.
Chuck?
Chuck, that's
Chuck.
right. Yeah, no, those are two great characters, and those were, yeah, it's always interesting if you have a character that you don't want to see get killed, and then they get killed, and you're like, ah, I like that one.
That was most of the characters in part three.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you knew they were going to get it at some point, but and then there was uh, what's her name's boyfriend who gets the eyeball squished out.
Oh yeah. And that was done. That's pretty cool, considering the fact it was 3D back in the day.
Yeah.
It's still pretty cool, sort of.
Yeah, and we can all see the strings and all the little, tricks that pop out, but if you haven't watched that movie in 3D, actually watch it with 3D glasses on, it's not the same. It's a completely different experience.
I've watched it with the 3D glasses that come with the set. You know, the blue eye and the red eye.
Yeah, no, that I think it was probably a year ago. It was the first time I actually watched it in 3D, and it was a completely different experience, and I loved it. I was like, this is great. Which you know, speaking of the 3D film, Nick Antosca, who wrote uh, sort of a reboot after the 2009 redo of it. It was supposed to be a 3D movie as well, and that script was done really well. That was a good script. That would have. It's too bad that didn't make it and get greenlit to actually get shot. I know they kind of went down a different path before the lawsuit, kept moving on and got worse and worse. But that was a good script. That would have been fun to see.
It would be really cool just to go back and read every unused script
Hmm.
of a Friday the 13th film because I'd say there's bound to be a pile full of gems out there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you never know what's sitting around out there. But I definitely read the Nick Antosca one, and he's a good writer. He does good work, and that was it. Wasn't perfect. I think that there could have been a few little tweaks, but for the most part, it was definitely a good story, and it would have been fun, especially in today's modern, the way we shoot 3D now. It would have been a different experience.
Can you share any of what you remember of it?
Um, well, I some of the stuff where there's a camp. It kind of feels like the 80s again, where they're bringing out some of those likable stoner characters, young teenagers where they're at a summer camp and they're counselors. So you have a lot of that 80s vibe going on, and it's across the lake from where Camp Blood is. And they want to go and inspect it, and they all kind of sneak over in canoes and paddle over to the camp, and Jason's already there, kind of watching. He's in his own zone over there, but um, it's a pretty crazy ride, and there's some really gruesome kills in it. I know this one guy goes down the slide near the water, and the machete just comes up, and he just takes it right as he goes down the slide. So just fun stuff like that, and you think about the way these kills are written, and you're trying to put it in a 3D perspective in your mind too, because that's the way it was supposed to be shot. Would have been really cool. Would have been really cool to see.
It's a shame that with everything going on, that didn't get greenlit because that sounds like a movie everyone would pay to see, and it sounds like it'd be back to the fun setting of the camp and the hack and slash, which Jason hasn't got to do in quite a while.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even the ending's really bold, where he takes a bone saw and just hacks up all these police officers at the end that are in town. Um, it definitely was a good script, and if you look at like the way they're doing maybe like the Hellraiser series, you could take these different ideas and run with them and do these different stories, because we all know the how convoluted the timeline is through Friday the 13th. It's hard to keep up with,
Yeah,
and they've each film. If you look at each Friday the 13th film, not one of them is similar to the other. Every film is different. We have different looks of the hockey mask. We have different characters. We have different um, time
settings.
frames. We have Jason in space. All these different ideas, which kind of helps the fan films in a way to where they can take their own ideas and run with them, because it's kind of open season with the way the story is. So we can pick and choose, kind of cherry pick, what lore and what look we want, and create our own story with it. And I think that's really cool.
It'd be cool to see an Uber Jason fan film. You know, just where Jason X leaves off. It'd be cool if someone picked up there.
Uber Jason.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that in the theater, and I walked out of there. I was just like, well, that was fun. You know, you can't, you can't take that film seriously. You just have to go in
Definitely
with the
not.
fun. It's like it, even Freddie versus Jason. I think that was more. And I heard somebody say that Freddie versus Jason felt better in with the Freddie, the Nightmare on Elm Street catalog than with the Friday the 13th catalog.
That
And
makes
I
sense.
think I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. That makes perfect sense when you put it like that.
Yeah, because it felt very Freddie dominant. It was based on Freddie's way of getting to the kids by using Jason.
Yeah, Jason was essentially a side character.
Right. And then they made Jason just big and dumb. And it
Yeah.
was just like, you kind of lost a lot of what Jason was about in that movie, I think.
So, part 3, yay or nay?
Definitely a yay.
I'm with you on that one.
Too many iconic imagery from that film. Yeah, 1 through 4, I think, are all going to be yays.
Yeah, I was going to say 1 through 4, without a doubt, all yays. And part 3 also features a kill that I think most guys will wince at, the handstand kill.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. Gruesome,
The-
probably the most brutal kill in that movie.
yeah. Oh, God. And it doesn't half make you wince. Sure, it doesn't.
Yeah, no, that was a brutal. I mean, just the way they shot it looked like from up underneath plexiglass to make it look like a floor.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was great. And even like from part 2, we got the guy in the wheelchair with the
I am with
machete
the
in the
machete in
face,
the
just
face.
wheeling down. Those are so classic. You can't. That's how we, as fans, I think, relate and remember these films as those iconic moments.
And then moving on to part 4, which I don't know if you would agree with me, I think would be the darkest entry in the franchise. I feel like in that one, Jason is just proper pissed off. There is just something. There's just something there that if you watch part 2 and 3 and then 4, Jason just seems at his most angriest in this one.
Yeah, Ted White, what he did for the Jason character was he really made Jason feel terrifying. Um, adding sort of that. I know Brooker ran a little bit in part 3, and even Steve Dash had some running moments in part 2. But when Ted White, Jason ran after Trish in between the two cabins, that was scary as hell. That was terrifying because you're like, he can catch you.
Yeah.
That's scary. And those are, especially because I think I watched those probably when I was 12 years old, so you kind of relate to that Tommy Jarvis character as well, and you're kind of on the same page with him. But you're seeing Jason at that age. It was that movie scared the hell out of me.
And it's safe to say that that's the one time you're watching a movie and you're like, no matter where I run or hide, I'm I'm done. Like I know when if I was Trish, he would have caught me going up them stairs.
Yeah, yeah, no, and you're just like, when he busts through the door, he throws that hammer, and he just keeps going and going, and no, that was a great film. Now it's definitely one of my tops. Like Tom Savini says, he goes parts 1 and 4 are the best because he
And
was involved in them. But maybe he's biased. I don't know.
what would be your favorite kill from part 4?
God, that's a tough one because there's so many good ones. But I really loved the spear gun into uh, the crotch when
Yes, on the way on
Paul
the
comes up out of the deck after seeing his girlfriend in the raft, and he comes up and just that was brutal. I remember seeing that for the first time. I was like, oh, that's scary.
yeah, there's a theme going on there, isn't there, between part 3 and 4? Jason is just out to annihilate crotches.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, that's the sort of the forbidden rule there. You can't go there and have sex, right?
Exactly. Part 4 as well also introduced us to yet another final girl that she was one of the ones as well. Trish, she was one of the ones I thought her story should have continued on as well. Because
Yeah, I'd love to see Trish, in another installment. I felt like she did a really good job with her part, with her role, and she could go either way. She could be a stronger character or be completely just out of her mind at this point.
just as you said there, we get to see the effects of Tommy, and we followed his story through 5 and 6, and you're sort of thinking Trish had seen all the dead bodies. She had watched Rob get murdered in the basement. Her PTSD is bound to be just as bad or even worse than Tommy's. So
Hmm.
it would have been cool to see what happened to her after the 4th installment.
Well, not only that, but you could take it in another way, and you know, like part five could have been, his sister maybe committing suicide and adding to Tommy's rage and anger and his journey, because she couldn't cope with it. Um, it there's just all kinds of ways to go even darker with that storyline, um, and that's some of the things that you could do in these fan films is take these stories down those paths if you really want to.
Yeah, totally.
Um, you know, I don't know if the actress who played Trish is up for doing any more roles or anything, but you could take these storylines, these little uh, you know timelines, and fan them out into these different, segue them into other things that could come back into where we find, Tommy Jarvis going to dig up Jason before he gets lightning struck. Those little things. You can fill in those gaps somehow.
And then, well, how do we point there? 2 seconds. Yes, meant to say director of part 4. That's where I was going with that one. Joseph Zito.
Hmm.
Did you see his work on The Prowler?
I have not.
No. You should
No.
check it out. It's don't know what everyone else think, but I think The Prowler is one of the most solid sort of horror films, like slasher films, and it features some very gory kills. So I think that having him on was a perfect choice. But if I remember correctly, there was a whole sort of hullabaloo with him in the cast, wasn't there?
Yeah, yeah. I think he was pushing, a lot of these actors pretty heavy. And yeah, you got to be careful, and sometimes you have to, put your creativity or your art aside for other people's well-being, which is more important. But I mean, it has its story definitely of how it was made, and we got a great movie out of all of it.
I think if he had came back for a couple more installments, I think we would have had a near perfect Tommy Jarvis trilogy.
Yeah, what would part 5 have been like? Could we have taken from like the special features, the deleted scenes at the end of part 4 is kind of what we took a little bit in the beginning of ours to create our connection to part 4 in our prologue. And you know, them finding their mother in the bathtub at the end, Jason escaping from the Jarvis home and being picked up, or who knows what happened. They could have taken that anywhere in part 5. And a lot of people love, they got on board with the Roy thing and love the idea of it, because I felt like the studios were doing whatever they could to get rid of Jason. uh but why, isn't that more terrifying to keep something coming back like Jaws, like it's just
Yeah,
unstoppable force? You got hints of him through Tommy's,
hallucinating.
nightmares and his PTSD, his hallucinations and everything, but which was cool because you got a taste of Jason in there a little bit, but you just never saw that in between 4 and 6 of what Jason was like throughout that, and I think that was a missed opportunity.
So before we move on to number 5, part 4, I think is an obvious yay.
Oh yeah, one of my tops, definitely.
And then moving on to part 5, which sort of introduced us to the character of Roy, and it was more of like a whodunit,
Mm-hmm.
as Jason's dead. So like, is it Jason? Is it a copycat? I think initially we're meant to believe it was Victor. I think he called him from the beginning.
I think you're way out of line, Vic. No, and it kind of lends to that part 1 mystery because nobody really knew about Pamela, about the mother coming in, and that was a complete surprise. So I think it was kind of a touch on the first film with that idea. Um, Also, not making, whether or not they were trying to do something to segue into Tommy um, being more crazy and maybe turning him into Jason or something like that. Um, yeah, there's a lot of fun moments in it. I remember that was, I think, the first one I saw in the theater, and I love the opening stuff with Corey Feldman. I thought it was great.
Yeah,
Um, it's probably one of the things that I always watch, and I even took some of that concept with homaged into Jason Rising as well. Um, but it's like there was some good stuff there and some fun stuff, memorable stuff that characters like um, Ethel and her son on the dirt bike, and
oh yeah, Junior.
yeah, would you shut the fuck up, that kind of stuff. Funny, it's fun stuff, and there's some great moments in there, but it's still, I still felt like at the end of it you got cheated,
Just
because you
slightly.
really never got you. We want Jason. We felt like that was taking it um, away from what we loved. You got hints of it, but it wasn't enough, and that's where obviously segueing into the next one is where we felt like yes, yes, that's what we wanted.
A character in part 5 that I love, and the scream always makes me laugh, of Reggie the Reckless.
Yeah, Reg, yeah, he had a pretty good scream, didn't he? He's almost a scream queen.
Man, I'd love to see what Reggie's at now.
But he was a kid. We'll give him that because he was a kid. But I mean, look at all those fun moments. You got the the girl who was doing the modern dance at the time, the popping and locking and all that stuff, and you got a lot of those memorable moments, back then, and then you had Reggie's brother, who those damn enchiladas.
What a
We love
dazzle.
that stuff. We love that stuff. That's fun stuff. But overall, you still, it wasn't Jason, and that's where I think Friday fans just felt like this wasn't what we wanted.
Yeah. But then part six it delivered everything the fans could want. But before we go on to part six, part five, yay or nay?
Um, I'm gonna go neutral on it. I'm gonna give it a half, kind of in between, because there's things that I do love about it, but it's just not, it's not a complete turd, but it's not where I wish they could have gone somewhere different with it.
It would have been a good Friday movie if they'd put Jason in there
Mm-hmm.
and kept, they had to. Reggie is like a staple for me for part five. He would have to have stayed no matter what.
Well, yeah, and you could have used all those same characters and still brought Jason back. You could have instead of making that bit where uh, the Corey Feldman opening, instead of that being just a nightmare, that could have been not just a hallucination but a memory,
And that would have been really cool.
and him actually coming back, and something happened to where that's, he got out of that situation, but instead of it just being a nightmare, it was a memory.
Which takes us on to part six, Tommy and a graveyard. Same opening, except this time around we've got an adult Tommy resurrecting the actual dead Jason. What did you think of the original opening of part six?
I loved it. I love that opening. One of my favorite openings of a Friday. Tom McLaughlin, he really hit that Frankenstein home run with it. Just bringing him back in sort of an old classic horror way. Um,
And
it
it really brought Jason back in a new way. He had his newfound strength. Like I think it was his first kill, wasn't it? The hand straight through the chest.
Yeah, yeah, where he got Haas and took his heart out, and I mean that was just, I remember that in the theater, and that was great. All the worms, and which I definitely paid homage to in Jason Rising, with all the worms coming off of him in the grave, and yeah, no, I loved it. That was good stuff.
And it
First
features
first
some
poster I
memorable
had on my
moments.
wall actually
The first poster you got on your wall?
was Jason Lives. Yeah, found it in an old video store. They were selling posters, and I found that one, and that was great. Took it home, and first big poster I ever had.
And just like the other ones, part six is full of memorable moments.
Mm-hmm.
It's got, first of all, it's got a killer soundtrack from Alice Cooper. The paintball scene, I think, is one of the most memorable moments of the movie. Don't you agree?
Yeah, one of the goofiest ones, I think. That, again, like, these sometimes they add in characters that don't really motivate the story at all. They, even like in part five, where you had the guys in the leather with their car broken down, and Roy, just shoves a fuse in their mouth, but these are body count movies, so we need bodies.
Exactly.
So they may not necessarily be important to the story, but they're filler to give more bodies to kill for Jason, if that makes sense. So it wasn't a necessary thing, but I know why they did it.
They were more like rejects from like Police Academy, though, weren't they?
It felt like it, especially one
Trying
of
to
them.
trying to put the tree branch back on after he broke it and all that.
Yeah,
It was pure slapstick, but ah, it probably gave Jason a good laugh in the long run.
right. Well, and if we look back on it, we watch it now and we're thinking, okay, that's kind of goofy and kind of corny. But back then, it was funny, for the time, and it worked, and you know, we still love it.
And in part six, do you have a favorite kill in that? Would it be the opening kill?
Um, I would probably say, uh, when the sheriff gets his back broken, bent backwards. That was pretty good. That was a good one.
As for back in the day as well, it was really well done. I prefer the version they have, in the deleted scenes. It's not quite finished yet, the effects wise, but like the sound and everything, it's just a bit more brutal. But I
Hmm.
think they were told to cut that.
Yeah, most likely. I'm sure if we ever got actual director's cuts of these films, they'd be a little bit different.
And it was a staple too, because it was the first Friday film to not feature any nudity. And
Hmm.
it went to show the franchise really didn't need it. It just needed Jason to be pissed off and have a weapon.
Right. Well, and it also showed that that 80s Paramount formula mentality wasn't why that film was successful. And that's the way they pinned it out to be, is that you have to show, you know, you have to show breasts every 10 minutes, or you have to do this every so often. And that's what they did. They made it a formula. And I don't think that that's those are business people, not creative people. They're
Yeah,
looking at numbers, and they look at it as, okay, this is fuel proof. This is why it works, instead of just looking at it as a creative endeavor. And sometimes things take on a life of their own and tell their own story, and it's not based off, okay, step one, step two, like non-creative people think. They're bean counters. Stay away from the production side of it. Just write
yeah,
the
I couldn't
checks,
agree more.
give them the money, let them make the movie, and stay away.
That always seems to be the case, doesn't it? There's always too many people want their input on something, then they have no right putting their input on it. Like producers seem to just hijack movies all the time and butcher them.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good producers out there. That's their job. They're there to keep people on track and make sure that this things are going the way they're supposed to. But there's some that these are just money backers, and they don't understand filmmaking or story, but they they want to see some boobs in a movie. So or they want to see this comedic part put in there, and it's like, but that doesn't make it better. Those are just. But sometimes you have to cater to that because they're the ones writing the check.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of
So
like a
I
needs
mean,
must.
that's why some decisions are made the way they are, I think.
So before we move on to part seven, which is a vast change in the formula of the Friday the 13th movies, six, a yay or nay?
Definitely a yay.
So we've had five yays and one in between, one neutral. So we're doing well so far. So we can
Yeah.
safely say the first six movies in this franchise are good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Then we go on to part seven, which did turn the franchise on its head a bit. It brought in the telekinesis stuff, which was a huge change for the franchise, as it was a bold move as well, because the franchise was basically teenagers, Jason, machete, cannon fodder. So, what was your take on the whole added telekinesis element?
You know, I remember seeing part 7 in the theater, and for one, this was the first time we see Kane Hodder, who did an amazing job in 7. It's probably one of the scariest looks overall, I think, that they took Jason.
Yeah, definitely. With
Um,
the spine was out, and there was the crack on the mask.
yeah. I mean, they just, John Paul Beekler, he took every wound, and which is how you should have done it. I
Yeah,
think that was great. Um, I think the Carrie versus Jason idea. Not a lot of people were on board with it, but I felt like it worked
it
because you
did.
have this undead creature that this killer that keeps coming back from the dead. You need something to be able to battle that, something otherworldly in a sense, and her powers was a good foe for Jason, a good rival in a sense, to where you needed something to battle him, something a little different. And I felt like the way they did it, it worked with Tina. She didn't understand her powers, and it had this story tied into it. A lot of people didn't like the idea, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good way to go.
Yeah, likewise. Part 7 would be another one I would revisit quite a bit. As you said, it's the debut of Kane. Jason does look quite terrifying in it. And the way sort of Jason carries himself throughout the movie, the way he's like always sort of breathing and his shoulders are going, and he just Kane made an awesome debut as Jason, and it was very memorable. And as you said, Tina and the telekinesis, it worked. It wasn't too goofy or anything. And you're right. If you have that Jason as he is, like Nick shoots Jason a few times with a gun, and Jason just throws him aside. So you did need something to sort of battle him. And I think the way they went is really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it goes to the fan film as well, Roseblood, which focuses on these same characters of Tina, Nick, and Dr. Cruz, which I think is going to be interesting. It's a fan film coming up, and they've got the original cast back: Kevin Sparadas, La Park Lincoln, and Terry Kaiser.
Hmm.
So it'd be cool to see what way they take the story, and they've sort of done what you've done in a sense. You gave Alice life again. They've gave Dr. Cruz life again.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing about doing these fan films is we just have to stick to a high standard, and also um, making sure that we handle these characters with care. It wasn't having especially bringing back a character like Alice. She's such an iconic character through the franchise, and you have to just tread lightly because you could take it and really hurt it. You could
Yeah,
do some real damage, and fans could really just go against you really quick if you screw that up. And one of the things that I know that we really wanted to do with bringing Alice back was give her some redemption and kind of show a little bit, not overstating it, but kind of show how she could have survived her ordeal and why she survived. Um, it's I'd love to do a full Alice film. That would have been great. And at the time when we were building these characters and doing our story, because we needed a way to get to Crystal Lake without the typical, campers going in and the debauchery and all that stuff. Um, So, and that being said, is that if it didn't work with the story, we wouldn't have done it. It wasn't just like, well, we got Adrienne King to play Alice in our film. We did it because it worked with the story. It made sense
Yeah.
for her to come back. Who better to take on a resurrected Pamela than Alice, the one who took her down the first time? That felt like a great way to put some closure on how her character was done in, you know, from Paramount in part two. And there's a lot of those little things that we added in to give that character redemption. But it's all about the story. It worked for the story, and I felt like that was the perfect way to tell it, is to have her come in when it was time, when Glover needed help. And it just, it fell into place. But even with Tom Matthews in the Never Hike Alone stuff,
Yeah.
Each of these characters, these survivors or whatever, they have their own stories to tell, and they have their own adventures with Jason and Crystal Lake. And I think it's neat that we have an opportunity as filmmakers to be able to tell these stories for the fans, and that these actors, these characters are coming to the screen again in good productions and whatnot. And even uh, Vinny Guastafaro, who played in part 6 the deputy, is telling his own story too. His story is carried on from Camp Forest Green with Tommy Jarvis in Never Hike in the Snow. And it's really cool to see these stories come to life. And that's kind of what I was touching on before, is that you could take these stories in like a series way and just branch out with them. And it could, then they could come back around, and all these characters could intertwine and join forces and eventually be able to find a way to stop Jason.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it? To have all the old characters grouped together and then sort of like have a battle royale, all these characters versus Jason.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them would make it. You gotta pick and choose who's gonna survive, but it would be cool, And I think that is what you would need to be able to stop that force, is the people who have survived it.
So before we move on to part 8, which yet again features Kane Hodder as Jason, would we say part 7 is yay or nay?
Definitely a yay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, is the 8th installment, and it features Jason looking a bit fresher than he did in part 7, I must admit. Still pissed off though. What were your takes on the new look of Jason and the opening kill?
Part 8 was one of those movies that you felt like if they never made it, life would have been just fine. We'd have been okay without it. Because I saw that one in the theater as well, and we got Jason, sure. Kane, always plays it great.
For sure.
But it's like they really
milk the cow.
Yeah, it just, they really lost. I mean, sure, there's some fun kills with, like, Julius, the boxer, gets his head knocked off and things like that. There's some fun stuff in there, but it just felt like this was unnecessary. And this is where it started to turn to comedic moment and cheese, where they made Jason a joke.
Yeah.
and made it wasn't a horror film anymore. It was killer clowns from outer space with a hockey mask.
And then they also tried to add in that sort of backstory that it didn't really need to be put in there. Do you remember when she was on the boat and then he just pushed her over? That's one moment I felt they could have skipped
Yeah.
in there. There was too much trying to tell, too much character story going on at points about her traumatic time when she fell in the lake. And I feel that segment, that whole storyline about her past encounter with Jason didn't really fit the story. If you get what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, it wasn't needed.
No, and honestly, it felt like somebody who had never watched a Friday the 13th movie was given the reins to make one and just, watched a few just to kind of get an idea what he was in for.
And there wasn't really any likable characters in it, from what I remember. There was no one I was really rooting for, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, how is, you have a ship going out to the ocean from the lake, which really would make it a river at that point. But we overlook that stuff, right? We don't pay that much attention to it. But
Nope.
yeah, it's I guess it was, what was that, 90s, early 90s when that came out.
Think so, yeah. I'm near
It's
sure.
hard. I don't remember the time frame that one came out, but yeah, it was forgettable, I think.
As fun as the entry was, I think we're both in the same boat when we give it an A.
Yeah, definitely an A for me. Just a lot of the look of Jason after the hawk was taken off just looked horrible. I
Yeah.
wasn't a fan of that hockey mask at all. It just, I don't know, just overall, and not to mention, um, you know, the comedic stuff to it. Going to New York, they tried making it this big thing of him showing up in New York, which at the time was probably fun and probably sold plenty of tickets in the box office to make some money back, but it was such a diversion from the original stories.
Yeah, Jason was more of a gimmick by this point.
Right. And that's what it turned into. It just turned into a sideshow.
And then we move on to it's the very odd part nine. While being sort of a Friday the 13th film, doesn't really feature much Jason, as in the fact of hockey mask, machete. We more get him possessing people. But one thing I do like about part nine is I thought it had a really awesome opening in the cabin when she's going in, and you're like, oh shit, get out of there. And she's fixing the light, but then she turns into like this kick ass SWAT woman and all. And the opening I found fun.
I think that was probably my favorite part about that entire film until he gets blown to shit.
Yeah,
Because it felt like Friday the 13th. It had that feeling like we hadn't seen in a while. I wasn't a big fan of the look of Jason. I mean, all of a
I
sudden
agree. And
he was
Jason looked very.
tucking his shirt in and he had his belt nice and neat, and that felt kind of weird to me. But yeah, definitely like you're saying, that opening felt like a Friday the 13th movie.
Oh, sorry, you broke up there, James.
Oh, am I back? Can you hear
You're
me?
back now, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
100%.
No, I agree with you. That opening felt like a Friday the 13th, and I wasn't necessarily a fan of the look, but yeah, definitely that I like that opening scene. And then you were like, "What the fuck just happened? He just got blown up. How are we get now? What? What are we gonna do now?" And the whole possession evil slug thing was kind of a disappointment. Um,
Yeah, I agree. It was very confusing too. You're
Yeah,
like,
I
why
was
is he?
just like,
Why is he a slug?
what in the world just happened? How did this, where did this come into the lore of any of this stuff? I mean, you know, it'll be interesting to see, you know, the documentary that Adam Marks is putting out on how that film got made. But yeah, definitely interesting. But no, I remember seeing that in the theater, and this opening was just like, okay, cool. This feels like Friday the 13th, you know, and yeah, then it just went south quick.
That really should have ended where she went into the clearing, turned round, macheted the head off her, and then that was our opening. And then we've got an introduction to Jason. He's still beheading people. He looks scary. He looks kind of old ass too. And, you know, it could have moved on to campers or whatnot. But except we got SWAT team blow him up. And then his heart, I think, was beaten in someone's hand or something or other. And yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I went to the coroner, and then he got possessed by Jason, and it just went all over the place with that one. I mean, then of course we had the tie-in with the Book of the Dead with
yeah,
the
can't forget that.
Necronomicon, and the dagger, which is, you know, I love Evil Dead, I love it. I even added a little bit of homage from the Evil Dead into Jason Rising. Um, Although I think that sometimes you're stepping on sacred grounds if you do too much on either one of those, you know.
Yeah,
So you gotta tread lightly, and you know, some people like it, some people are really against it, so you gotta tread lightly. And I'm doing a fan film, which gives me a little bit more freedom to where they the Evil Dead fans will appreciate it. The Friday the 13th and Evil Dead fans will appreciate it. The hardcore Friday fans may go, not really into that, but it didn't bother me. So I kind of just added my little hints of it, rather than going, look, here, you know, here's the Book of the Dead, here's all this. This is all touching on the Evil Dead. This is why this is happening. I didn't want to go that route, even though I love the Evil Dead. It was more of a tribute to that, because I love the one thing I love about the Evil Dead is the the eeriness of, you know, the atmosphere, the fog, the creepy
yeah.
cabin in the woods. All that stuff just gave its own, it was its own character. The fog was its own character. And I love that. And that's how I kind of felt like the curse and Pamela tied in, where if there was fog around, then that was, the curse was around as well. You stepped into that cursed area. Once you cross that line, that you're into that dark void now, where things are different. It's going to feel different. So
And then part nine also ended with the cameo of Freddie to a degree, his glove.
mhm.
Do you think the intention was then for either to have a Freddy versus Jason then, or a Freddy versus Jason and Ash? Do you reckon they were going to try and connect all these worlds, or
Who knows? Who knows what they were thinking? I'm sure they, maybe it was just kind of like when Fox put Alien Skull in the ship in part two of Predator. Um,
yeah,
Maybe that wasn't intended. It was just more of a, hey, this is fun. Um, but it was never like, we're gonna make, you know, Alien versus Predator or anything like that. Maybe it just, that whole thing at the end maybe spawned the idea. But who knows? Who knows? You know, could have been in the works.
before we give it the yay or nay, I should also mention that you touched upon the coroner getting possessed by Jason. The way this comes about, anyone who hasn't seen it, he takes the notion to bite into Jason's heart, which is one of the oddest scenes I remember from it.
Yeah, yeah, and
But then
that's
it does feature a cool kill with the Wolverine like spikes into the man's head. That was a pretty cool kill.
mm-hmm. Well, and that's you as a traditionalist, as a old school Friday fan, you're confused, you're lost, you're like, I don't know what's
Oh
going on.
yeah,
This is they we bring in all these characters that we've never heard of, um, like the bounty hunter that knows everything about Jason, but we know nothing about this guy.
yeah,
So it's confusing. It's a confusing story. It just really diverted from anything of Friday the 13th that we know after the beginning of it. And it's just one of those things where you're just like, what happened? Where do we go
yeah.
wrong here? So I don't know.
A nay on both parts.
What's that?
A nay on both parts, and
Yes,
thumbs
yes,
down. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I would not recommend it to any Friday the 13th fan or anyone who is trying to get into the franchise for sure. Anyway,
You don't want to start with part 9.
no.
which is funny that you mentioned that, is because that's why you have a lot of like younger people and they start with some of these later movies. And then when you show them some of the earlier ones, they're not into it as much because you'll have kids who are like, Freddy versus Jason is my favorite.
Yeah, and you're like,
So
what?
it's like you don't understand that because we come from the old school versions, and it's like Star Wars. Kids watch the older Star Wars movies and they hate them, but they love the Phantom Menace and Jar Jar Binks. But it's the time. It's what they first are exposed to and what they relate to, and that's how they connect to it. So you just have to kind of look at it like that. And we get you know judgmental because we're just like, no, the older ones are the best. Watch the older ones. And there's still that argument out there that Jason never ran. Jason doesn't run. Well, yeah, he does. Have you watched the old Friday movies? Jason ran all the time. But that argument's still there, is because that's what they're not exposed to, that stuff first, so they don't look at Jason in that light.
Yeah, Jason was a regular with the old CV. He was quite the sprinter back in his day.
That's right. He
And
didn't have
then,
tunnels back then.
exactly, he just ran through that forest on foot. He was like Rambo.
That's right.
We move on now to Jason X, which is the 10th part in the franchise and features Kane Hodder in his last role as Jason. He does the usual good Kane Hodder stuff, but once again, they were totally just milking the cow. It's a
Mm-hmm.
fun movie, all the same. Like, you watch it and you're like, that was actually fun, but it's not a Friday the 13th movie, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to just step away from Friday the 13th with this one and just take it as this fun Jason adventure. Um, because yeah, I saw this in the theater and I walked away from that one going, okay, I had fun. We knew going into this one that we weren't coming out going, ooh, that was scary. This was a
Yeah.
fun Friday, this was a fun Jason adventure, and it was way over the top. We knew it was going to be, because we saw the commercials where he was, this super Jason, and you know, if you go into it with that mentality, you come out of it with a better result, I think.
Agreed.
Like where part 9, you went in going, I hope this is, you're going in with a little different expectation, and you come out going, what the hell did I just see? What was that? Where Jason X, we knew what we were getting into, and it was fun.
And it did feature some cool throwback memories, like the kill with the sleeping bag and what else? The face free. You remember when he throws the woman's face and then head it off the desk, and then
Which is a great one. That's a great kill. I
yeah,
love that one. Very inventive.
and then they go old school. They have the Marines hunting Jason down in the loading bay, and he just takes them out. I don't know if it was meant.
Which feels like a little bit of a Aliens ripoff with the Colonial Marines, which
Yeah,
that was great. We love that. So I think them going the route that they did with it, it worked. Kind of like how Part 7 did with the telekinesis. They knew that this wasn't going to be taken seriously, so have some fun with it, and you can kind of go however you want with it, like going back to Earth when it's all screwed up and finding Jason frozen, and it's a little weird with the whole Crystal Lake Labs thing, which was a cool entry, a good beginning to the film,
yeah.
because you get to see Jason. It was kind of a different look. Um, Felt very Kane Hodder, uh, but it was a cool way to start the movie. I think, even though you're going into this outer space, saga basically.
And then I had watched this recently, so my mind is still pretty fresh on it, and I watched it with my mentality now of knowing Jason. So I think I sort of ruined that beginning bit for myself because I remember always watching it and being like, shit, this is cool. But then these army guys come in to get Jason, but he's not there. He's killed the soldier there, and then he wipes all these boys out. But if you look at what they're coming in with, they're coming in with an extended pole with a little noose on the end of it and a shotgun. And I'm like, you know who this guy is, infamous serial killer, and you know he can't be killed, and you've got a shotgun and something you'd use to control like a little alligator.
Right. Yeah. Like where's the mentality behind that?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was like,
and that's some of the stuff that you have to look at and go, okay, what are we what are we facing, especially if they're familiar with what Jason is. You have to have different tactics for that. Um, I always thought what might be an interesting story too is maybe you have like a military training group and they have to drop in to do like a training exercise, and they're off course and they accidentally jump and they parachute into Camp Crystal Lake, and so you have this military force going in, and unfortunately, because it's a training exercise, they don't have live ammo, so they're kind of fucked. So you're in this battle, and they're just they're out there with their little paint things. Maybe one of them brought live ammunition because he's a douche or something like that. But you have to come up with different ways of them not knowing what they're in for, not knowing who this person is, um, not having the usual mentality of going camping in some place they don't belong. That kind of thing to me is fun. But yeah, like you're saying, if you have people who are aware that they're what they're dealing with, what are you doing with a pole and a shotgun that isn't going to do shit? So what
yeah.
are we doing here?
So after a whole escapade of watching Jason fly around in space, would you say Jason X is a yay or an A?
Oh, I'd say yay. I had fun with Jason X.
Yeah, I had fun with it too. I watched it a couple of nights back.
Yeah,
Did
that's
not
a fun
regret
one.
at all. I loved it.
Yeah,
Which,
I mean, especially like you said, that kill where her face is frozen and he just slams it and it just shatters. That's cool. I mean,
that
that's
is.
very cool. That was an inventive kill.
And then we move on to Freddy versus Jason, which replaces Kane Hodder with Ken Kurzinger,
Hmm.
and we obviously get Robert England as Freddy, who He's Freddie. He's always been Freddie and always will be Freddie for me. But I don't know. I don't want to blame Ken. I want to blame maybe the writing of the character in that movie, as
Right.
Jason just wasn't really Jason. He felt like he was oversized for a bit. You could see he was wearing platforms, and
Right. Which it felt very Frankenstein.
yeah. And my gripe has always been with the head. The head just looked too plasticky. It just looked like someone had put on a plastic head hockey mask and they just cracked on it. The makeup and overall look of Jason felt very lazy.
Right. It
What
was very clunky, and that's definitely one I felt like they just made Jason dumb and slow, and just they didn't, whoever designed it didn't know what they were doing, didn't know Jason and understood the character. They just tried to make, you know, an ugly Frankenstein monster. And it just, like, what would it have been if Kane Hodder played Jason in that film? Would it have been different? You know, I mean, how different would it have felt? Um, Instead of just, you know, and I don't think some of the kills were that bad. Um,
the bed fold, it was
the
good.
bed fold was really good. Yeah, that was a good one. That was fun. Um, but it just, it's hard to put those two characters, I think, in the same world. I think it really is. And as like, I could see the Michael versus Jason thing a lot more than I could see the Freddie versus Jason thing, just
Yeah.
because Freddie operates in a different form. You know, he comes through your nightmares, where, you know, Jason's not going to have nightmares, I don't think. Um, maybe he does. Who knows? But it just felt like it was two worlds that didn't belong together.
Yeah, I agree. Would it be an entry you would visit a lot or
No, no. I mean, there was some things in there that were like kind of cool for Jason that I think could have been used in, you know, and worked really well in other films or something, like the machete, you know, through the tree, um, which, you know, is pretty cool because it shows how powerful he is
yeah.
and strong. Um, and you know, it's tough when you take an iconic character like Betsy Palmer, and you know, you start changing these characters around, and just putting them in there because you want to, which was, it's tough for us, but we kind of paid tribute to Betsy Palmer and how we did Pamela. Um, but you have a completely different looking Pamela in Freddy versus Jason. You
Yeah.
know, red sweater, and sure, you're in like a dream type state where Freddy is, you know,
Controlling
kind
it
of
all.
being, you know, being the mother, but it's, I don't know. It's just, it's weird. You're taking an iconic character, an iconic actress, and kind of just pushing her work aside. And that's something that I know it's tough, that any studio would have a problem with. Um, and that's why we kind of made it a younger version, but still kept the look the same, because that's how Jason and fans remember her.
The writers of Freddy vs. Jason, Shannon Swift, also said they had wrote a follow up with Jason in the Snow. Would you have liked to have seen that follow up?
Uh,
Oh
yeah.
shit,
I
that
mean,
was the follow up to the next one. My bad. Um,
yeah. Well, I
we should
mean, you
get there.
know, that's what Vin took the reins on, that made it happen. You know, with Never Hike in the Snow,
Which I
and
love.
fans had always wanted to see it. And I know Tom McLaughlin wrote his script, Jason Never Dies, which features a all-female group that was in the snow and everything. And I'm trying to remember, were they like a female hockey team or something like that? And anyways, they come across Jason somehow, and he gets revived like he does. And but it's in an all snowy thing, and you look at films like what is it, 30 Days of Night, where the snow is actually its own element. It's its own scary element in a film because you're battling the cold, which
Yeah.
if you add that into, not, with Jason coming after you, and you battle that cold and that element, that adds a more intense moment for these characters. It makes it harder for them to survive. So I think that'd be really cool.
So Freddy versus Jason, yay or nay?
I'm gonna have to put that in the nay pile. Sorry, guys. Sorry
That's
for
a
the
nay
future
from me
Jason
too.
fans.
A
Yeah,
couple of cool elements in there, but it just doesn't live up to what a Jason movie should be.
yeah, and like I said, I felt like if you put it in with the Elm Street world
It works.
as a more of a in that pile, it works better than in the Friday the 13th pile.
And then we move on to the final installment we've had in the big production cinema screen Jason movies, which was just titled Friday the 13th. And if I remember correctly, that was 2009.
Yeah,
What was your take on the whole reboot of Jason in 2009?
I just felt like that was the biggest missed opportunity that they had. I mean, they could have really fixed this, and they just, there's a lot of fans of the reboot, and I think Derek Mears did a great job. I wasn't a fan of the look of Jason personally, but you have all these. It's trying to cram all these different things into one film,
Yeah,
and instead of just really going back to the basics um, of the lore and everything, they just did this hodgepodge bunch of shit with characters to just kill off, and trying to explain things that didn't need to be explained, like tunnels under the camp,
yeah.
um, things like that. I just felt like really weren't. I mean, I know why he did it, because he wanted to put more of a human perspective or a realistic perspective of why Jason pops up in different areas so fast, which I get that, but that takes away some of the mystery and the allure of Jason, um, which makes him less scary because we understand him a little bit more. And I think when you take away, some of the imagination and some of the thought that you leave up to fans to have their own, ideas about, I think that hurts. Like I remember, I love the first Matrix film, but once I saw Zion, it kind of took away that mystery for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't as cool anymore. I'm like, it's kind of a disappointment. So, you know, those types of things to me feel like they're unnecessary.
It would have been, on a lighter note anyway, it would have been fun to see a montage of Jason digging these tunnels.
Yeah, I mean that would have been, were they already there? Were they? Is that part of why they had fires, because of these mines? Who knows? You could have taken it in a um, little different app, explored it a little bit more in depth if you really wanted to. But then we're looking at My Bloody Valentine, where we got mines and and things like that, where we're treading on that territory, where the mystery of this curse that covers Camp Crystal Lake, Camp Blood, and that area. That's the scary stuff, That's the stuff that we don't understand. We don't know why the curse is there. I don't want to know why. I just know that there's it's got a death curse, and that's the scary stuff.
Would you say that the opening of the new Friday the 13th would have been strong? Were you a fan of it?
Not really. I mean, we knew that Jason saw his mom beheaded that night. They basically changed the Alice character. They kind of took their own redo of the original Friday, which again, there you had an opportunity to put Adrienne King in the opening film, even though we've already seen it, to give her, something to be in these films again. And it's one of those scenes where if you took it out, it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference for the rest of that movie.
So after the not so much liking for the new Friday the 13th opening, would that be a yay or nay in recommendations?
For me, it's a nay. I left, feeling like I was cheated out of Friday the 13th that we should have got after that film. I felt like the person who made that movie didn't understand Friday the 13th, and you just were disappointed. Especially that's the last film we got, and they had $30 million or whatever to make this film, and you're like, that's what you gave us. There was some okay moments, but we just got run of the mill. We didn't get a great Friday the 13th movie.
Of course, after that, the lawsuit and all that carry on has just sort of hindered us from getting any more entries. And then it's guys like you and Vin who have brought Jason to the screens through fan films. So your own one is Jason Ryzen. What was your inspiration to put this movie together?
I think just being a Friday fan, it was a way to be able to see the Jason that I remembered as a kid, that part 3, part 4, taking it just a slight bit further. And which is scary in a sense, because you're treading on sacred ground, and you're like you're like, I hope I don't screw this up, because if you screw it up, you're gonna get a lot of hate for it,
Yeah.
because you're treading on sacred ground that people, some fans are like, it's great, it's fun, Jason, doesn't matter. But for me, I really wanted to have that feeling of that Brooker White Jason again. And that was the inspiration, especially knowing Dan before we started this, that he would be able to pull that off.
And then getting the funding for these movies clearly isn't an easy task. You have to put all these perks up for one, which I'd say cost a good amount of money, like Blu-rays, posters, etc., etc. And then most of all, I think would be the hardest part would be getting the trust of these fans. So I'm sure setting all of this up and like getting all your perks together, like knowing how much of this, that, the other you would need, like Blu-rays, badges, and then getting the fans backing. I'm sure that was stressful for you. Like, how would you even go about convincing fans to put their money into you?
Well, you have to, it. You have to first kind of create something and show them what you're capable of doing. And if they like that, if they, you have to build a strong enough campaign that it looks like you're serious about doing this. And once they get to know you, and Vincent Desani, who did Never Hike Alone, after he came on board, really helped us fine tune the campaign aspect of it. And he did very well with his. He was very successful. He's on top of his stuff, and so that lends to a certain trust factor as well. So that helped gain confidence for our backers to want to get on board and help support this. And it's a huge amount of stress. It's a lot of work. Because people don't understand what goes into it. I'm the only one who deals with the campaign stuff. As far as like, I get shipping boxes, and I have to order posters and set up perks and get T-shirts and mail them out and go to the post office. You know, when I get these things set in, and not to mention, I mean, I've got a job too. I got to make a living, and sometimes people get the wrong impression. They have this idea that you're this 24-hour a day perk warehouse that just can send stuff out instantaneous. And it's like we're working hard at making a movie on top of trying to run, you know, this campaign side to get people their perks. And it's a lot of work when you're you're just struggling to get this film made. It's hard enough. And then you have to keep contact with people and just let them know what's going on. They got to understand what it takes to do something like this. And even when we're not getting, even when the film's not even finished, I'm having people wonder where their Blu-ray is. I'm like, well, we don't even have a film yet. We're making a movie. So, and that's some of the miscommunication, and people see, like, say you get $40,000 on a campaign. You have to subtract the fees, you have to subtract what it costs for perks, insurance, all of those things just cut into your budget immensely. And what you see on screen is just a a small portion of that budget. So that's why you have to raise it. It takes so much backing to get one of these films made because of that reason.
Am I right in assuming as well, when you guys are sort of putting this together, you are doing this in what would be considered free time, like you have a 9 to 5 or whatever, and then this here is just a side project?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. You're doing this on your free time. You know, I'm not making a dime off of it, and you're just, I'm the one making costumes, props, and painting hockey masks, and trying to figure out, the schedules to shoot and what we're going to be able to shoot, where we're going to shoot it, and making sure that the scenes are ready. So, I mean, that just really eats up into your day and your life. And it's all about passion. It's all about, it's a labor of love. You're gonna just put everything into it, and hope that what all that sacrifice is made up. The reward is a good film.
And getting original talent involved again in their characters, like you got Alice back and then you got Amy Steele back. How did you go about getting these original characters back?
Well, I had written, Robert and I wrote a original version, and it had Adrian King in it as well, and it just didn't work out. And he had, Robert was, a good friend of mine, my acting coach, and he had a lung issue that sent him to the hospital. He needed a lung transplant, and eventually he got it, and he was in ICU for 8 months and had a lot of complications with it, and finally overcame him back in 2020, where he passed away. And during that time frame, because he was in ICU for so long, we had to come up with a concept and start working on something. During the time that he was still writing different versions with me, when we were trying to work on the script, he had wrote a scene, which is the scene that you see where Alice hears the radio call and she's painting. And that scene always stuck with me for whatever reason. And I felt like, I was trying to rearrange this ending a little bit, and it came into my head. I felt like Robert was, pinching me from the spirit world, going, "Hey, look at this again." And it was always something that I felt like Adrian was perfect for. It fit with the story, and I reached out to her again, and we were able to chat and make it work. So there's a little bit of fine tuning of what happened. The original ending we were supposed to do, it was actually in the camp down in Camp Crystal Lake, because I always wanted to see Alice back in that world again. But unfortunately, during the ice storm over the winter, the trees collapsed and just destroyed the camp. So we couldn't shoot that scene. So we had to kind of rewrite and move it towards the barn back at the prison camp.
You also brought back Mrs. Voorhees as well. What was sort of the inspiration to bring Mrs. Voorhees back as almost sort of, the only way to put it would be Evil Dead terms. What was bringing her back as like a deadite?
Well, I mean, Pamela's iconic. I mean, she's the reason why we're all seeing these Friday films, because she kicked it off, and her psychotic love for Jason is the reason for the revenge and why Jason kills, because she was always, pushing, with her psycho voices, hearing Jason and being able to bring Pamela back into that world. Always felt like, okay, we're taking a risk. We know it. How could we make this work and still keep it cool, but not like some people think that it's way too much, it's way over the top. But I felt like when we see Linda, Ash's girlfriend in The Evil Dead, when she's headless and everything and coming into the shed with the chainsaw, as goofy and puppeteery as that is, that was terrifying. That was creepy. And I love that stuff. I love the way Greg Nicotero and his team did that whole bit. And I felt like if you're going to do something like this, you have to still have fun with it, even though it's over the top, because we're smart people. We're not going to take serious that a headless zombie is going to be coming out of a grave and walking around. We have to put into an unrealistic context a little bit.
Yeah.
So the best way to do that, I felt like, was to do it similar to making it feel Evil Dead, because I love that whole puppeteering, creepy practical effect thing, and we kind of did a little bit of that.
What was your favorite, or your own personal favorite kill of Jason and Jason Ryzen?
Well, they were all really fun. Each of them had their own challenges, especially trying to figure out the practical side of it to sell it. When you put the edit together and everything. One of the ones that felt really good was Robert had wanted to do like a blunt force thing with one of the kills, where skull was hit so hard it kind of dislodged, and that's what we did with Jed, and we just kind of amped it up a little bit. But that was really cool for me, because I wanted to have some of Robert's fingerprints on the film as well. So that one felt good, and it was a lot of fun. It was a long, cold night, but we had a lot of fun doing the practical effects on that.
The kill where Jason rips out the spine and the and the skull head. That was really cool.
Yeah, that was my Predator homage. That was, a lot of people are saying that that's more of like a Mortal Kombat kind of, fatality move, which I could see that now, but before it was just like, it's Predator. Jason's like a predator.
Have you? Oh, obviously, Jason Ryzen has been very successful. I've seen loads of great reviews for it. Has there been any talk of a follow up, or would you know where you'd want to go? Or for now, are you just living in the moment with Jason Ryzen?
It's kind of like, yeah, I mean, you don't really think about it because there's still so much to do to finish the campaign and complete everything, and you're winding down off of a 3-year adventure from all of this, and um, because of all the obstacles, we dealt with COVID, we dealt with fires through the Northwest that hindered it, we dealt with ice storms that caused problems. So there was a lot of obstacles to get over this. Obviously, it would be a quicker um, thing to do a part two. At, where we would take it, I don't know for sure, and I wouldn't want to say until I knew the story was fleshed out thoroughly.
Yeah.
Um, but you're just like, you're trying to finish the campaign and hopefully be done with it before the end of the year, and you get your Blu-rays out, then you can go, I can wash my hands of that adventure, and then because right now it's hard to focus on anything other than finishing up, and you're super excited that people are enjoying the film because of all that went into it. Um, but you get questions, people are asking, when I can't wait to see part two, and people are excited about it now. So you're just like, what do I do? Do I put this in motion, or do I just let it do its thing, um, and be a one off? Because originally it was never meant, we were just going to do one film and call it good. Because I have lots of original ideas that I'd love to get finished, full feature scripts, and start working on those as well. But it's all about how, if people want it, if people want to back it, if the story's right, because that's first and foremost, if the story's there. And I wouldn't do it unless the story was there.
Would you, if you were to go and do a sequel, would you try and get Amy Steele in as a full cameo rather than a voice cameo?
Yeah, which would be great, and I think we could really travel down that world more, if she's up for doing something like that. From my understanding, she's not really into getting back on camera right now, but people change. You never know. Um, but yeah, no, that was definitely. I would have loved to have done it in this first film, um, and I was excited that we were able to get her voiceover for Dr. Field and Jason Rising at the end. But yeah, definitely it would be something that we would want to do.
So, what can fans of Jason Ryden expect to see you do next?
Um, that's a hard to say question because I just don't know. It's because you never know what you're, even as being an actor, you just never know if you're gonna do another role again. You just don't know. And so my main focus right now is just getting everything dialed in for the backers through the campaign, finishing this out, and making sure that's completed, which is a task and a half in
I can
itself.
imagine.
And trying, because we have to edit together all the special features and put the interviews together that we have of our cast, and so that it's going to take a little bit of work and keep us occupied So until that's all good to go, it's hard to focus on much of anything else. And you know, you were just kind of riding this wave of Jason Rising at this point. And you know, I know Vinny's getting his stuff going on trying to finish your get Never Hike Alone 2 going, which is going to be a full feature film. So I'm sure I'll be involved in that, helping out what I can with that. So there'll be something. So who knows? You know, you never know. If something comes up where, hey, you know, so and so's gun ho and they want to do this, and it's like, well, let's get the story fleshed out and see what happens.
And to any backers that have to come across this, when are you hoping to get final blues sent out for?
Well, we're trying to get started all of our Blu-rays into production by October. Once, you know, because we don't want to rush the special features, because what you have left at the end of the day is that piece of media, and we want to make the nicest piece of media, with the special features. You have the film, you have, behind the scenes, you have interviews. We just want to make that really nice, so that takes a little bit of time to do it right. So we don't want to rush it, but we want to get it done and get it going. So we're hoping, October, we can start getting those into production, start getting batches mailed out by November. That's the
They
goal.
have they have it, guys. So that can hopefully ease up James's email with spam of when's our Blu-ray coming.
That's right.
It's on its
When's our
way.
Blu-ray coming? Well, and one of the things that, especially, we're gonna are in the works right now are all the VHS tapes. Those are going to be a little less of a problem once the covers are done, because it's just the film. There's no special features on that, so those can go into production sooner. Same with the Blu-rays, or I'm sorry, the regular DVDs. It's just the Blu-rays are what has the special features in it, so that those are going to take the longest.
And slow and steady wins the race. So,
That's right.
James, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, man. I
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time, and I really loved Jason Ryzen. So, fingers crossed, we do get a follow up, or we get to see just another original story by yourself.
Awesome. No, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate having me on your program, and that was good.
Man, I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, James.
Absolutely.
Take care and get them blues rolled out.
That's right. Back to work.
All right, man. See you later.
All right. Take care, man.